Hi guys! In today's video, we'll be making this Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street inspired doll. I've tried to go all in on the creepy Halloween theme this year, and so far you guys seem to like it, so I'm really glad. So I hope you enjoy my take on this character, and let's get started. I used a second-hand Monster Hydrocolor doll for this project, but you can use whatever doll you like. The first thing I did was to kind of sketch on where I wanted the eyes and also the smile, and then used my X-Acto knife to cut away the lips to make room for the teeth we're gonna add. And as you can see, this doll was already kind of primed for repaint because I tried to repaint it previously where I failed, so I didn't like that one, so that's why it's already, you know, bald and faceless. Once we made room for the smile, I took some white polymer clay, which I kind of stuffed into the mouth, and then used my sculpting tools to sculpt the teeth that I wanted to add. And you might be thinking, hey, don't you need to bake polymer clay? And yes you do. I do this by sculpting directly onto the doll, and once I'm happy with whatever, you know, prosthetic I'm sculpting, in this case teeth, I heat it up with my hairdryer, and since the piece is so small, the heat is enough to set the clay just a little bit so you can pop it off from the head without disfiguring it, and then you can bake it properly according to package instructions, and then you know it's cured. While the teeth were baking, I took my X-Acto knife and cut off the point of her ears, since Dracula has pointed ears and Freddy doesn't. So just cut off the tip and then use a file to smooth it out, and then I glued in the teeth. So next we're gonna mix up some nail gel, some sculpting gel with some acrylic nail powder, and this is going to make a thick paste which will function kind of like a 3D gel that still has to be cured on a UV lamp. And we're going to use this to build up the face and make it look, you know, scarred and burned. So I use my sculpting tools to add bits of this paste directly onto the doll's face and then mold it around. It does self-level a tiny bit, but not so it doesn't lose its shape completely, so that's a good thing. So apply it, smooth it out, allow it to self-level a little bit, and then you can kind of, you know, poke holes and move it around to where the tissue is supposed to look like it's burned, because that's, from what I understand, what's supposed to happen to Freddy's face, that he's been burned, so that's why he looks like that. Whenever you've done something where you're happy with the look of it, then you can cure it in your UV lamp for at least just a few seconds to set it in the beginning, and then once you've done the entire face, you can give it the full recommended time in the UV lamp in order to cure it completely. So yeah, I just did parts of the face, you know, one by one, and then cured it a little to make sure I didn't accidentally mess it up or squish it with my hand or something. I naturally had reference pictures of Freddy on my phone, so I could see where this texture of the gel was supposed to go. And honestly, so far, this is the only doll I've ever worked on that kind of freaked me out when I was working on it. I just found it really disturbing to sit and look at these pictures of Freddy, because he's kind of a gross character to me, and then sit and work on this doll where in this stage it just kind of looked like the face was melting. And yeah, I just found it kind of disturbing. So, once you're happy with the look of the face at this stage, you want to cure it completely to make sure everything is properly set. Once you're done sculpting with the gel, it's important that you rub down the surface using alcohol, and this removes the sticky layer of the gel that has been in contact with the air. And yeah, this is nail tech talk, but you just have to wipe it down to remove the sticky layer. To get a good paste color, you want to mix up acrylic paint until a somewhat flesh tone, and then cover the face and also the texture we've made in that. allow that to dry completely, and then seal it with the Mr. Super Clear spray to ready it for the repaint. And I use my chalk pastels and also my watercolor pencils as I usually do. Someone recently asked in the comments what kind of pencils I use, and honestly the most important thing is just that they're watercolor pencils, because if they're not, they might react badly with the sealant, so just make sure they're watercolor. And I use a mix of Faber-Castell and also Candach. Accentuate the texture we've already made by applying red chalk pastel just around the eyes and also in all of these kind of spaces and cavities we've made. I also lightly brushed a bit of red overall on the face just to give it a proper flesh tone. For the teeth, I watered down some yellowish brown acrylic paint and applied this just for a general gross color. And a little later I watered down some black paint and just to get this in the crevices to identify the individual teeth. I use white acrylic paint to paint in the eyes, but you can also use pencils if you want. I just wanted opacity right away without building up too many layers. At this point I sealed with the spray again so I could start a second layer and build up more color. Then I went in with a red pencil to add some more definitions. For instance, in the exposed muscle tissues there should be some small lines, and also just add a bit more color. And I found that I had to be pretty careful not to accidentally scrape off the paint, because the layer that was directly onto the doll's skin was kinda thin. So you have to be mindful of that. I use some black chalk pastel to shade the actual, eyeballs, because it adds dimension and shape, and I also use it to shade around the eyes into this sort of almost cavity, and I go into all the other indents as well, because even though we've sculpted them three-dimensionally, once something is in very even color it goes very flat, so it really helps to add the bit of black in there as well. I also shaded the face where you normally would, beneath the cheekbones and the temples. And then I gave it another spray and worked on top. In this final layer I add the final bit of definition and just clean up. And I also add highlights, and specifically the more harsh highlights of the eyes and teeth. I use the watercolor effect of my white pencil. Once you're happy with the finished look, give it the final spray and set it off dry. Now for a sweater, I made this very simple pattern and cut the pieces out. Then you want to sew the front and back pieces together by the shoulders, and I made the back piece into two so you can close it up with velcro or buttons later, just because the doll's head is so big you wouldn't be able to put it over like a normal sweater. Then you want to sew on the sleeves before folding it over and sewing the side of the sleeve and the side of the sweater. And that's the basic sweater done. All you have to do is close it in the back. I then stuffed it with some cardstock so I could paint on the stripes, and I used some fabric paint for this in a very dark green, but it ended up looking kind of brown on the sweater. But I just couldn't find any fabric that was suitable and striped, you know, this small. For the gloves, I used some imitated leather and cut a small strip and glued this to the top of each finger. Then I cut another piece to add to the top of the hand. Now for the blades, I cut these out using scissors from a thin piece of metal from a reshapeable cake pan, but you can also use something from like a can of food, and then you want to glue this in place onto each finger. Once the face was dry, I added a tiny bit of glaze, kind of dry brushed all over the face, before going in on the eyes and the teeth with resin to make it properly shiny. And finally for the hat, I glued on a ring for the shade, then I glued on a strip all around the top, kind of like a top hat, and then folded down the top piece to close it off. And there we are, there's a Freddy done. As I said before, this is the first stall that has ever probably kind of freaked me out when I was working on it, so I figured that was a good thing, because then I guess I did a good job. But then again, I just might be a sissy because horror movies really do scare me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project, and if you have any other requests for Halloween themed videos, do leave them in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in a new one real soon. Bye!